All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're now going to go over level 2 charging techniques, right? Which basically means we're going to learn how to enter techniques for entering a deeper transcendental state and or entering a state of full attention, right? So the first thing basically to recognize about deeper transcendental states is to, like we said in the last video, is that they're based on entering a state of full attention and holding an intention while in a state of full attention for about 7 to 10 seconds. And when you're in a state of full attention, and you hold intention for 7 seconds, and the subject embedded in that intention has 100% of your attention. When you do that for 7 to 10 seconds, you enter a deeper transcendental state, right? And in that deeper transcendental state, you charge in a much more intense way, right? Now, the important thing to understanding how to do that is to understand a little bit more about your attention, right? So the important thing to understand about your attention is that attention is relegated to the control of the conscious mind. So that's very important. That we pretty much alluded to that the whole time anyway, but this is going to be, that principle is important to state explicitly here because it's going to be important for the rest of what we talk about. All right, so when I first started learning when I started really studying how to charge at level 2, and when I first started practicing all of this, right, I would always notice that there were times, it didn't happen all the time, but there were times when I would be able to charge much more intensely than normal, and it did feel exactly like what I call a deeper transcendental state. Now, I didn't have this whole formalism back then, so I wasn't quite sure what was happening. I didn't have a theoretical foundation to describe what was happening, but I did know that there was a such thing as a level 2 charge, right? I knew about that like in almost the very beginning when I was studying this stuff. But I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand how to charge there, because a lot of times I would charge and it would end up being a level 1 charge, and I just couldn't do it very intensely. Eventually, as I developed more of the theory and I studied this stuff more and I studied a state of full attention more, I realized that attention was the key to charging at level 2. And then I learned that your attention is completely relegated to the conscious mind, right? So it's basically an exercise of free will. However, while that's true, to go over the second point here, compulsion helps the conscious mind to manage attention. So basically what I mean by that is your subconscious, which as we said this whole time, right, it has the ability to alter the perception of the conscious mind. Part of altering your perception means compelling the conscious mind to direct its attention in a certain place. So that's very important. Even though where you direct your attention is actually an expression of the usage of free will, the subconscious mind still can help you, right? Can help the conscious mind to direct its attention through compulsion. Same way the subconscious directs it compels you to feel an urge, and it makes certain decisions with your free will easier to make and other decisions harder. So we talked about that in chapter 1. So that basically that same exact principle works when it comes to how the conscious mind chooses to direct its attention. Now, the important thing to understand about a state of full attention is that, actually, let's go over this point first before I get into that. So your attention, your body actually, to go over this point, the body charges the subconscious. The body, charges the subconscious and helps the conscious mind to split attention to multitask. I think I wrote that a little weird, but in a nutshell, what I'm saying there is that your body sends a command to your subconscious, right? So like we said in chapters 4, 5, and 6, the body charges the subconscious too, in addition to the mind. And the body charges the subconscious in a way that compels the conscious mind to feel an urge to direct its attention in multiple places. And that basically is how we multitask. That's what allows us to multitask. I think maybe I give this example in the book, but just to basically a very simple example, is when you're walking down the street, right? So when you're walking down the street, you're focused on the cars. Some of your attention is focused on the cars, right? So you know when to cross the street. Some of your attention is focused on other aspects of your surroundings. So if people are walking past you, right, you don't want to bump into someone. So some of your attention has to be focused on spatiality, right, or the spatial distance you have between things, so you don't bump into something. Some of your attention is going to constantly be evaluating your progress, where you're going, how far I am from this point, where should I turn, right? How far am I from the place I need to go? Some of your attention is also going to be focused on just things you have to do maybe later, right? Or just random, interest you have in the moment, right? So, and I know it may seem very seamless to do those things as you're walking down the street, but that actually, remember what we said about the attention principle. You can't think something without putting some of your attention on it first. Which what that means is if you're doing all of these things, even the act of not bumping into a wall, right? If you don't bump into a wall, in some aspect of your mind is calculating, right, your distance from a wall and is monitoring that. That's thinking about it to some degree, which means it takes some of your attention to do that. Now, like I said, although it seems very seamless to do these things, that's because your body is helping you. Specifically, your brain is helping the conscious mind to do that, right? And if the brain wasn't helping you, it would be very difficult to multitask in that way. Now, to go over this point, entering a state of full attention requires you to resist the urge to split your attention. And basically what I'm getting at there is kind of what I mentioned last video. Although the body helps the conscious mind to multitask, and it does that by charging the subconscious in a way that compels the conscious mind to split its attention. That helps you to multitask, but it doesn't help you to enter a state of full attention, right? So it actually makes it very difficult to reach a state of full attention, right? And so, but remember what we said, attention is completely relegated to the conscious mind. And what we also said in chapter 1 is that no matter how strong a compulsion is, the conscious mind can still resist the urge to go along with it. And so this same principle works here too. The brain is going to compel you to split your attention between multiple things so that you can multitask at all times. But the conscious mind can still resist the urge to focus on different things and just try to put all of its attention on one thing. Now that's tricky to do because this is why I say level 2 charging is always a little bit hard, because there's no rule to this. There's no 1, 2, 3 calculation you can make to always enter a state of full attention. You just have to resist the urge. No matter how strong it is, you have to resist the urge to focus on other things and just consciously, through your own free will, try to put all of your attention on one thing. That takes practice, right? So it's hard. I know it might be a little hard describing it, but that's pretty much what I do. I feel like I can recognize when other people are doing it too. But yeah, it's something you'll get practice with when you start charging and kind of controlling your attention more deeply. But there's no trick, there's no calculation you can do. You just have to resist the urge and try to put all of your attention on basically the story you're telling in your mind to enter a deeper transcendental state. Now, if you can manage to do that, and we'll talk about techniques to do that, because when you charge your subconscious properly, the compulsion helps you to do it, right? So when the compulsion's helping you to do it, it's like a boost. So it makes it easier to basically enter a state of full attention. But in your subconscious normal ground state, where it's charged by the body, it's not really helping you to enter a state of full attention. And so you just have to kind of do it. And even if you manage to, you'll kind of know when you're doing it I'll describe these symptoms here, but you'll kind of know when you do it once you get more experience. You'll kind of know when you enter the state of full attention. And even if you manage to do it for 1 or 2 seconds, you have to now do it for about 7 seconds, right? Or 7 to 10 seconds. And basically what it feels like is if you enter a state of full attention, you're going to feel some urge at some point to just think about something else or split your attention to other things. And then the moment you do that, you kind of are now going to enter a level 1 state where you're charging. So keeping about 70% of your attention on the story you're trying to tell and holding an intention is pretty easy to do, but keeping 100% is hard. It's tricky because you're going to feel some urge or some compulsion to split your attention, and you just have to resist it, right? And so it's kind of hard to do it for a full 7 to 10 seconds until you enter a transcendental state. But if you manage to do it successfully, there are going to be some symptoms or some aspects of the experience that you kind of will know, right, represents you entering a deeper transcendental state. So, So when entering a state of full attention, just to go over this, you will actually forget that you're trying to charge. So this is important. Well, it's not really super important, but it's a common, I would argue it's a very common symptom, right, or quality characteristic of the experience when you're entering a deeper transcendental state, or when you enter a state of full attention. Like when I'm doing it, my mind gets, and I'll talk about it a little in a moment, but my mind gets so immersed into the story because I'm trying to get all 100% of my attention on the story that I actually forget that I'm trying to charge. Because in order to hold the intention and tell a story and maintain the thought in my mind that I'm, trying to charge my subconscious, that thought alone doesn't contribute to the frequency I want to charge, right? So if I want to charge the love frequency, holding on to the thought of producing the intention that I'm trying to charge, my subconscious, that doesn't charge the love frequency. That just charges maybe some frequency related to focusing on a goal, right? So I have to get even that has to not be in my mind at the time, right? So when I enter a state of full attention, I actually completely forget what my original goal even was, right? And I know that might seem strange, right? So I'm going into this with a goal in mind, and then I manipulate my thoughts in a way where I forget my goal. If I forget my goal, how do I still accomplish it? Right? Well, that's why level 2 charging is so tricky, right? I'll talk about the techniques here for doing that, right? But it is possible to do. So when you do it the right way, you actually end up, so much of your attention gets drawn to the story that it just kind of pushes out thoughts like related to I have to charge and this is my goal, I'm trying to enter level 2. Even those thoughts just don't stay in your mind anymore. So you actually just enter a state of kind of forgetfulness. You forget what your whole goal was because you're just so immersed in the story. And then when that happens, you enter a deeper transcendental state, and then you switch to just using your instinct to kind of continue to tell that story. And then the energy component of your subconscious action, or the action performed out of instinct, is very strong. Like if it's emotion, for example. So that's one symptom of entering a transcendental state, where you kind of, if you experience this, then you kind of, it's a good sign that you're in a state of full attention. It's when you're so immersed in the story you're telling that you forget that you're trying to charge more energy. The second symptom is that time also gets more distorted. Because even to focus on time and sort of recognize this passage requires some of your attention. Now, we do that throughout the day, but I believe your body actually charges, at the ground state level, the body charges our subconscious to sort of have a very small amount of our attention focused on the passage of time. That allows us to kind of tell time and get a sense of how much time has passed. But remember, like I said, with the attention principle, in order for me to think about something like that, some of my attention has to be on it. So even noticing the passage of time eats away at attention. So when you're in a state of full attention, you're not even the amount of attention that you would normally give to time isn't there. So time is very distorted in a state of full attention. So it's kind of similar to when you're in a dream, right? It's completely distorted. Even more so than when you're doing a, kind of like you're in a lighter transcendental state and doing a level 1 charge, right? And then the other aspect about entering a deeper transcendental state here is very important. You cannot watch yourself enter a deeper enter a transcendental state in full attention, which is a deeper transcendental state. So what do I mean by that? Basically, when you with a level 1 charge, you can kind of monitor, right? Because remember what I said in last chapter. You have to hold intention while telling a story, so you do both at the same time. But the part of your attention that goes toward holding in intention, right, still will cause you to enter a transcendental state as long as you hold it for 7 to 10 seconds, even if you're telling a story at the same time. However, because of the, let's say, roughly 30% of your attention that gets wasted on monitoring thoughts, you can still kind of watch yourself enter a transcendental state. You just keep watching. In a sense, when I'm doing it, I just keep feeling for it. Then right around 7 to 10 seconds, I notice my subconscious, like I said, or excuse me, my conscious mind it starts to want to enter a daydream, and then I time it. I sort of have to now relax a little or acquiesce and allow myself to enter a daydream. And then I kind of switch to using my positive mind or subconscious instinct to start doing things. Right? So it's not really that hard in level 1 charge to kind of watch myself doing everything, and that gives me more control over the process. You can't do that with a level 2 charge. With a level 2 charge, all 100% of your attention has to be on the story you're telling. So if some of it, even a little bit of it, is wasted on kind of monitoring, when am I entering a transcendental state? How much time has it been? Am I entering a transcendental state? Oh, I feel it, so let me, now relax and acquiesce. All those thoughts waste attention. So you're not even allowed to do that when entering a state of full attention. So it's very similar to when you fall asleep, right? If you try to watch yourself fall asleep, what happens? You tend to stay awake. And the reason for that is because the very act of keeping your attention fixed on monitoring your feelings or your mind drifting, that's actually a negative mind ability, right? That's your brain actually helps you to do that, and it has to stay in this ground state for you to have that level of control over your subconscious. Now, when you go to sleep, the ground state is your body stops charging the ground state, and your subconscious enters an excited state. So the very act of expressing the kind of control needed to sort of watch yourself sleep keeps it in this ground state and prevents you from sleeping. So you can't ever watch yourself sleep like that, right? And when you do fall asleep, what happens? Like it just sort of happens at some point because you can't watch it. You can't watch. The act of watching it requires too much. Too much control over your subconscious, so it prevents you from falling asleep. But when you do fall asleep, it just happens at some point. Who knows when, right? And then you wake up in the morning, or you wake up whenever. Falling into a deeper transcendental state basically works that exact same way. Your goal is to just put 100% of your attention on the story you're telling, and at some point you'll find yourself in a deeper transcendental state. Like I said, time is distorted, so you can't even really tell time that well, but you're just going to feel it, right? You're going to feel it, and you get used to it responding just to the feeling. It'll make more sense once you start doing it. But when I really start practicing, I haven't really done it that much lately because I've been so busy with stuff. I won't say I did it all the time. When I was studying this a lot, I kept trying to do it for practice so I could understand these principles more. But when I would do it, I would it's like I trained my subconscious. So as soon as I entered the transcendental state, I would know, right? And I would, even though I wasn't expecting it, I wasn't planning for it, I would forget that I was even doing it, but I would feel it. As soon as I enter the transcendental state, I know, and then I switch right away. You can almost, I wouldn't even say that some of my attention is weighted. I would just say I do it out of instinct. So it's almost like I trained my subconscious to just respond in that way, right? So I just do it on an instinctive level. And like I said, that'll make more sense once you start doing it. But yeah, you cannot, to enter a state of full attention, you can't watch yourself. You just have to let it happen, and like I said, at some point you'll find yourself there. If you try to watch it, then obviously that's going to keep a good chunk of that's going to eat up a good chunk of your attention, and that's going to prevent you from entering a state of full attention. You can still enter a transcendental state by watching it, but it's not going to be a deeper transcendental state. You can only enter a deeper transcendental state when you have full attention, and that means you won't be able to watch it. It just kind of happens at some point. So now I want to start basically talking about the techniques, right? So there are 3 main techniques for entering a deeper transcendental state. First one is kind of simple, and it's basically just patience, right? So excuse me. So over this point, you would patiently keep your attention on the story while holding an intention for a prolonged period of time, and you would resist the urge to focus on monitoring. Focus on monitoring thoughts. So what that means is, this is what I learned when I was practicing this stuff, right? Just keep your, like I said, attention is completely relegated to the conscious mind's free will, regardless of what compulsions you feel. But as you're telling your story and holding the intention, just keep trying to put your attention on the story, right? And what's going to end up happening is that you try to keep your attention like 100% focused on the story, you're going to feel a whole bunch of compulsions toward monitoring thoughts. So you're going to feel the urge to like monitor your emotions, check how you feel, wonder if it's working. Just keep ignoring them, right? And as you keep feeling those compulsions to think this and that, and you keep ignoring them, it starts to get a little easier. And then you keep ignoring them, and you keep ignoring them, and you just keep your attention on the story, You forget about trying to charge and trying to do this. Just keep your attention on the story and keep trying to tell the story and keep holding the intention. And eventually, as you do that very patiently and just keep waiting, don't try when monitoring thought enters your mind, like don't try to push it away. And we talked about that in the section on not statements, right? You can't actively not think a thing. When you can only do it passively. So just keep your patience, keep patiently focusing on your story. If a monitoring thought comes to your mind, ignore it. If you do entertain it a little bit, fine. Just switch back to focusing on story and just patiently keep ignoring them. And what you're going to find is, as you keep waiting and keep on your story and keep ignoring these thoughts, at some point, all of your attention just kind of gets put on the story. And then you'll find yourself in a deeper transcendental state. So when I do this, if I had to put a time to it, like I said, time's distorted, so a little tough. But if I had to put a time to it, I'd say probably after about 20 to 30 seconds of doing this, I will find myself entering a transcendental state. And then as I keep doing it, it gets easier and easier to enter, a deeper transcendental state, right? Which means I'm going to go in and out of transcendental states during that time, even if I'm continuously holding an intention for 7 to 10 seconds. So which is why I say patience. Just keep doing it and keep waiting. It'll eventually happen if you just keep ignoring thoughts coming to your mind. Even if you entertain them, just go back to what you're doing and just keep trying to ignore them. So that's what I do. I just hold the intention, tell the story, and patiently wait and keep ignoring thoughts that mess my ability, and just keep holding it and waiting. And eventually I find myself in a deeper transcendental state, and the charge will feel very intense. So that's the first technique. The second technique is, both of these are real. I kind of consider both these techniques kind of very similar. They're almost the same thing, but this one you would do in a slightly different way. So in this case, just to go over this, you would tell the story in your mind in a genuinely interesting way. And this will cause your subconscious instinct to focus more on the story. And so what I mean by that is basically, that's also what they do in Hollywood, right? That's what they do in movies, is they want to tell a story in a way that's interesting. So what do we mean by interest? So I feel like I need to take a bit of we use that term all the time, every day. But like I said before, I don't like to go by colloquial definitions, right? So I want to have a precise, explicit definition so I know what logically follows from that premise. So I forgot how I defined it in the book, right? But I would say interest basically describes the subconscious mind. Before I actually go into it, there are two types of interest, right? So I need to kind of go over that first. There's what I would call normal interest, and then transcendental interest. So normal interest is just your free will, right? Has exercised by your negative mind. So while your subconscious is in the ground state, it's whatever my free will chooses to focus on. So I can do that anytime I want, as much as I want, and on anything I want to. Transcendental interest is controlled by the positive mind, right? So it follows the parameters we talked about in chapter 3 of interest, right? So I can't do it anytime I want to. It's quantized by intention and frequency, and it has an energy component. So transcendental interest comes from subconscious instinct, right? So the negative mind doesn't fully control it. It comes from your subconscious instinct, and that represents when your subconscious charges in such a way that it compels your conscious mind to direct its attention towards something. The stronger the compulsion, the more your attention, the more the conscious mind feels the need to direct its attention towards something. Now remember, attention is, that's not to say that the stronger the compulsion is, it necessarily causes your attention to be directed. It's completely within the control of the conscious mind. The conscious mind can just ignore that if it wants to, right? That compulsion. But that is a form of transcendental interest, right? So I think the example I think I put in the book is kind of the one we've been using. So if you like a girl, if you have a crush on her, and you see her, you're much more interested, right, in sort of focusing on her. When you have a crush and she walks in the room, it's kind of hard to just draw your attention away from her. You can still do it, but you feel compelled to put your attention on her. So when you tell a story in the right way, like I said, they do this in Hollywood, in movies and TV, they want to tell a story in such a way that it causes you to charge transcendental interest. And when you charge more interest, your subconscious instinct wants to focus even more on the movie or the TV or whatever. And that focus makes it much, compulsion makes it much easier for you to draw more of your attention on the movie or the story. And so this is also why stories and movies, why writers like to make it interesting, because they're trying to get you in a state of full attention. And if they can get you in a state of full attention, you're going to charge much more powerfully, which means you're going to be more entertained, right? Because the emotion will be more intense. And so you basically want to follow that exact same creed when you're telling a story in your mind. Excuse me. So you want to follow that same creed when you're telling a story in your mind, right? Now it might seem like a little bit hard for you to tell a story in your own mind. You're the one making it up. It might seem hard to do it in a way that's genuinely interesting. But I've practiced this, and it's really not that hard. It's really no different than watching a movie or TV show, when you don't know the story, right? In those cases, you can argue it's new, and you didn't charge, it's a little easier not to charge the expectation intention for it, depending on the situation. But, like I said, in my experience, you can still do it on pretty much exactly the same. If you can tell a story in your mind that is legitimately interesting to you, right? Which takes work, right? So just like in Hollywood, it takes work and it's kind of hard to make a truly interesting story, right? It's the same thing here. It's a little tricky. You can't just kind of go through the emotions and just tell some random story to get yourself to charge. No, you got to really try to make an effort to tell a story in your mind that even you feel is very interesting. And if you do it properly, your subconscious instinct responds by charging transcendental interest. And then if you keep doing that, it can be so interesting to you that 100% of your attention gets immersed in the story. You forget, like I said, that you're even trying to charge. You forget what the goal is, that you're trying to do a level 2 charge. You're just so immersed in these stories. Like basically all you care about now is the story you're telling. It's just so interesting to you that all of your attention gets in it and you're just invested in the story. Who cares about charging? But if you tell the story in the right way, you will still charge some emotion at level 2 or in a deeper transcendental state. So the last technique, so there's 3, this is the last one. This one is different from these 2. This one actually involves the body, and this was kind of similar to how I used to charge the subconscious before I actually just learned to just hold an intention for 7 seconds. Because I didn't know that at first. I don't think I learned that until about a couple years into it, a couple years deep. Before that, I used to charge this way, and I had so much trouble charging because it wasn't the complete theory. But this technique I call the sleep awake method, right? So this, just to read this off, because I got to explain a lot with this. This involves performing a level 1 charge and then allowing your mind to drift off as if falling asleep for a few seconds, right? So that requires an explanation. I didn't really have much more space on the board for it, but Basically, the sleep and wake method works like this. When you when you're sleeping, right? So when you go to sleep, you produce a very specific intention, right? That says you're ready to sleep, and your body recognizes that intention. And what your body does is when you produce that intention, and there are other stimulus, right? So when you close your eyes, you're laying down, you're very relaxed in a comfortable position. That also, I believe, helps the body to have the proper response to sleeping when it's very dark as well. But just the intention itself also stimulates that response. So when you hold the intention to fall asleep, your brain does something, right? It releases some type of hormones or whatever, and it weakens the charge of the ground state in preparation for you sleeping, because that's what's required to sleep. Now, when it does that, as you would expect, it's a much easier. It's that actually also makes it easier to enter a deeper transcendental state. So in that case, you can argue that the role your attention plays is not quite the same as when your subconscious is in its ground state, right? Because when it's in its ground state, it's tricky to enter a state of full attention, because your ground state is compelling your conscious mind to split its attention different ways. But when your subconscious is no longer in its ground state, or when it's not in its ground state as much, because your body has decided not to charge it, then that alone puts you in a deeper transcendental state. So your attention, the role of your attention is not really that significant anymore. I would say it's still significant if you're producing intentions in a way that keeps your subconscious in its ground state. In other words, it causes your brain to respond in a way that keeps your subconscious in its ground state, then you won't fall asleep. But if your body does start to not charge the ground state so much, then that alone is enough to put you in a deeper transcendental state. So that's actually important. That was actually how I used to try to charge. So what I would do is I would just kind of relax my mind, and then I would kind of produce a very light or weak intention that kind of said I wanted to fall asleep. And I would do that while standing and doing stuff, right? But I would just do it just a little bit, because your body actually still responds to it. And I would just say it like I produce intention as if I want to fall asleep, and I would relax my mind. Then I would enter like a daydream-like state. And then I would start trying to charge my subconscious. Now, you can actually do that to perform a level 2 charge. Now, the problem with this, though, is that let's say I'm standing, you guys should do it while in a very comfortable position, right? Because if you do it standing, whatever, you could fall. I never did, but you could, so be safe. So only do this in a position where you could do this in a position where if you do lose focus or your mind drifts too much, you would still be physically safe. And so, but for me, just describing my experience, I would do this standing up while walking around doing lots of things, focus, looking at the world, not closing my eyes or anything. I would just hold the intention to sort of fall asleep a little, and then my mind would drift off a little bit. And then, let me see. Yeah, so I would hold the intention to fall asleep a little bit, like I said, while standing up, and my mind would just drift into it would drift into like a daydream state, which is a transcendental state, and then I kind of do my normal charging. But I would lose, when you do it that way, right, I lose a little too much of my negative mind properties, and we talked about that in chapter 5. And so it's much harder for me to sort of control what's going on in my daydream at that point, because it feels just like a regular dream, right? With a regular dream, when you go to sleep, you don't know what you're going to dream, right? You don't know what's going to happen, because you've lost the control that the negative mind has. So you're just kind of at the mercy of subconscious instinct. There's more to dreams than that. They're very spiritual. We'll talk about that in book 2. But for now, let's just say that you basically lose the kind of control your negative mind has. So you don't know what your subconscious instinct's going to do. Most of the time, it does not choose to just start charging, right? It just thinks random things, which represent the random dreams you have. So in order for this technique to work properly, to basically achieve a level 2 charge, what I started doing, this was when I kind of started using this technique in a more precise way, which is to do this. How I started doing this, we'll talk about much later, is that I started doing this really for a metaphysical charge, which we'll talk about in book 2. But when you charge your subconscious using a level 1 charge, something interesting happens, right? So when you use a level 1 charge, and let's say I want to charge the emotion of inner peace, and if I just keep charging it, remember what we said. Remember what we said. The energy from that charge lingers around in your subconscious memory, specifically your short-term memory. And so when there's a whole bunch of charge lingering around, what's going to happen when you start to hold the intention to just let your mind fall off and drift to sleep, and you kind of go a little deep into that kind of sleep daydream state, right? And you completely lose your negative mind properties. Well, what happens is the energies that's lingering around in your subconscious, it actually is still there when you enter that deeper daydream state, and it causes the subconscious to try to think, or your subconscious instinct to think in a way that reflects your charge, right? Because when you use this technique, right, and you kind of hold the intention to fall asleep a little bit, you go so deep into that. I actually forgot to mention, you go into a deeper transcendental state, but it's actually even deeper than when you do it, in these sections where we talked about you entering a state of full attention while your subconscious is in its ground state. You even go deeper than that, which basically you kind of recognize when you're dreaming, right? When you're dreaming, you lose pretty much all of your negative mind properties, and you can consider yourself to be in a very deep transcendental state. So that happens here too. You go into such a deep transcendental state that you're just kind of at the mercy of your subconscious instincts randomness. You don't really have the ability anymore to kind of use your negative mind to kind of do stuff, right? So the one thing you have to kind of save you when you go so deep, and to kind of make sure your subconscious instinct still focuses on charging, is the level 1 charge that you did. Now, it's still not perfect, right? So when let's say I charge the inner peace frequency at level 1, I charge it decently, I give it a decent charge, then I use the sleep-awake method. So I start to just kind of let my mind drift as if I'm falling asleep. So I'm not holding an intention for 7 seconds, I'm not telling a story, I'm just literally trying to let my mind drift off as if going to sleep, and then it does. Right? But now I'm at the complete mercy of my subconscious instinct. It's going to think whatever it wants to. I can't monitor it and try to make it do this. But the chance of it sort of doing what I want to depends on this guy. So it depends on the level 1 charge I did. That lingering energy increases the odds that my subconscious instinct will choose to try to charge. It'll think something based on my subconscious charge, right? And because it's so volatile at that frequency relative to some subject or set of subjects, the moment it thinks that, well, I'm in this deeper transcendental state, it'll start, it'll be influenced in a way where it starts trying to charge. It starts producing some subconscious action, right, in a way related to the charge, and specifically the emotion, and it starts trying to charge, and it charges in that state. When it does it, it's going to charge way more intensely, right? So that'll also be a level 2 charge. So that's basically the sleep-awake method. I rarely ever do that now, right? So there's just no reason, because I can do these. The only reason this is really that important, the only reason you might ever even do that at this point, at least as far as I can tell, would be for the technique we're going to talk about in book 2, in chapter 7. However, even then I wouldn't really recommend it for other reasons we're going to talk about in book 2. Now, the one downside to doing this, though, is if you do it too much, right, you eat away kind of at what you might think of as your sleep hormones or sleep drive, right? There are certain hormones, and I learned about this. I've always theorized about this. I've always theorized about this, but when I had sleep apnea and I had to look all this stuff up, I realized what I theorized about was true. But that's that your body has something called a sleep drive, right? And that sleep drive builds up throughout the day, even after you wake up from a good night's rest. And if you keep doing this, it eats up at some of your sleep drive. Basically, some of the chemicals you build up in your mind that help with sleep drive. This kind of makes some of them ineffective, and they build up throughout the day. So if you do this too much, you eat away at your sleep drive, and then later at night when you want to go to sleep for real, you don't have as much drive to, so it's harder. So you don't want to do this too much because it makes it harder to sleep in a regular way. But like I said, I rarely ever do this. I just want to mention it here, just for the sake of completion. But these two techniques are really the ones I use to enter a deeper transcendental state. So yeah, that's it. So that's level 2 charging. I would practice this because this is how you really get a really intense charge. So you want to kind of know how to do this. I would say this is important too for the spiritual stuff we talk about in book 2. This is also going to be useful for performance charging. We're going to talk about that in the next chapter. Excuse me, and you can increase your performance even more while using a level 2 charge. But like I said, this is always a little bit hard to do. So, it's good to get practice with it, to kind of get a sense of it and just have a better understanding of your subconscious. But I don't think you'll ever really be able to master it. It's always a little hard. In the next video, we're now going to talk about a new charging parameter, which I omitted all this time because it was easier just to talk about charging in terms of its intensity. But now we're going to talk about a new charging parameter called the burst action, which is something I realized and made it much easier to control my subconscious when I became aware of it and started creating theory for it. So yeah, that's it for now, though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.